Oscar asks about special CSS in Vue.php. Could you be a little bit more specific, or maybe that was something that um, maybe you were actually maybe you were actually coming to the answer that I came to, but before me, in which case, good job. Yeah, no, that's a very yeah, nice. No, that is totally that's a smart way to approach it. Now again, Vue.php is used in more places. It's basically used anywhere where you don't have a specific template for a page. So if you look in concrete5, the blog entry stuff, we actually end up using Vue.php to add to insert the blog entry content because there's no blog entry page type built into Greek yogurt. That was kind of by design to show off some of its flexibility, but so just something to keep in mind. Make sure that if you really want to use Vue.php as something that only holds the content for built-in concrete5 forms like register or login, you want to make sure that you have templates for all of your pages. Yeah, I can, custom attributes are a little bit, they might be a little bit outside the complexity level of this training, but yeah, just in general, um, attributes are found in the models/attribute directory and then in types. So you can see all of the ones that are installed by default. And they're a lot like blocks, and there are a few pretty good tutorials and how-tos out there about making your own custom attribute types. So if we head on into the documentation section for developers, and we come into attributes and attribute types, I believe, we have a pretty good explanation as to what these things do and how they work. Basically, they work a lot like block types. There's a view layer. You can specify the form that shows up in the dashboard when you're creating them. That's the type form. You can specify what the form looks like when saving them on the front end, sort of the front end. So for example, the select attribute has tons of options when you're creating it, and then it also shows up as a select menu when you're saving it against pages. So there's two types of forms when you're dealing with attributes. There's also a view, which is optional. There's a controller, which you have to, much like blocks, you have to create a bunch of different functions in here. So it can get fairly complicated, but the simple ones like if we actually took a look at the color picker attribute, which we installed, it's probably not a bad one to take a look at. All this is a controller and some custom CSS that loads when the form gets called, and you can see this is a function that runs whenever the form gets shown in the page attribute, and it's responsible for inserting some JavaScript and setting up the form correctly. You can add header items in attributes as well, and that will work. And so we're instantiating the color picker CSS and jQuery color picker library, which is built into concrete5. And then we have some more images that this thing calls as well. So attributes, can do some pretty some pretty cool stuff without having to be the most complicated thing that you write. But I would definitely, I'd probably try make sure that you know how to build a block before you worry about building a custom attribute type, because it's pretty likely you won't need a custom attribute type, because we build in number, we build in select, checkbox, text area, which can use the rich text editor. There's lots of different types built in. It's unless you have some really custom needs, you probably won't need to build an attribute type. Karen asks, how would you handle a home page with all one color background, body color, and then the rest of the page styles would have a body color that was different? Well, there is one very interesting way of handling this that we haven't really touched on too much, and that is with customizable theme styles. This is a totally different way of approaching customization that I should probably talk about a little bit, otherwise I would be remiss if I didn't. So let's say that by what you mean here is we have a black background here, and then we have a dark gray background here. And then we also use that same background down here. And so if you were to change your background color to white, you might want to change this to a light gray so that the subtle shifts or the shifts are, you know, sort of relative to each other. And you might want to do that, you know, if it's Christmas time, you might want to make one green, the other red, you know, something along those lines. You can do that with custom attributes, but, you know, you're referencing this in a couple different spots. And as you saw when I made this yellow, something you could change through attributes, what you have to do then is you have to put PHP code in your template which references this color. So it does kind of get rid of some of the niceness of CSS, because you have to move all the color logic for your template or your theme into the template, which kind of stinks. So here's a different way of doing it, which our themes also support. What we're going to do is we are going to create a CSS file called colors.css, and we're going to remove the background color from the body here, and we're going to add it here. And then we're going to figure out where the background color here is. It's header, I believe. Yep. We're going to remove that from there, and we're going to add it here. And then we're going to find footer as well. And we're going to add that background color there. So now if we refresh this, you can see we have no header background, we have no body background, and we have no footer background. So what we need to do is we need to come into header, and we need to make sure that we also include our color CSS. So that fixes that, which is good. That's the first step. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this color CSS customizable. So you might have seen this function in some concrete5 themes, and you might have been wondering why I wasn't using it. So get theme path here just gets a path to a directory, and the rest of this is just including style sheets the same way a regular HTML does. What this does is it takes color CSS and it pipes it through a customization script that concrete5 uses to handle color customizations. So if we look at view page source, you can see that colors.css is actually being routed through a script called tools CSS. So if I click here, it looks right, looks exactly the same way, but this is definitely not the URL to our style sheet. That's because what this URL does is it looks in the file that you send to it for what we call customization tags, or customization comments, actually. And the coolest part about this, I think, is that you can build in the defaults just into your CSS using CSS comments. So that will become more clear when I show you what I'm talking about. If we open up a built-in a CSS file for dark chocolate, you can see that the body, this is all just totally semantic, totally correct CSS. But some options in here have tags or have CSS comments around here that start with customize. And that is what this is all about. Anything that you wrap with customize underscore something will be added to the customizable styles for that theme in the dashboard. And we handle colors, we handle types, and we might handle images. I actually can't remember. It's still a little, we definitely like it to be more full-featured, but it will definitely work for what we're trying to do right now. So what you do basically is you just name these things appropriately. So you come here to body and you add this around both of it, and we'll call this customize body background. We make sure that this is named the same. And then we'll call this one customize accents. And I am actually not positive if this will work, but we will try it. I believe that you can actually reuse these and they will be stacked up. And so you will only have to change it once, but it will work in both spots. And I don't know if that'll work. We may have to have two separate ones for this. But if we reload this, you can see that it's just a comment. If we reload this, everything still works as planned. But if we log in as an administrator, since these are required in registration and I didn't actually specify these for the admin user, I have to specify those before I can continue. So now if I come into my themes, I come into darkness. If I come in here and hit customize, that's not quite what I wanted. I could have sworn that it was possible to reuse the same color throughout. Let's take a look real quick at a different one to see if I might not be right. Now it appears that it doesn't look like that works. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to call this customize header. It's still quite a bit nicer than what we had before. And I'll call this customize footer. If I refresh this, you can see that it pulls in the actual color that it currently is without having, we've never even touched this in the database before. It just parses the actual CSS to the current value, and those are the same. So now what we could do is, if we have a special Christmas promotion, we could say make it red in the background. If we refresh, we can preview what it's going to look like. That's without even, this is without committing our changes yet, and we could then make this header green. This is going to look really ugly. And I might even copy that so I can make sure that the footer is the same green as well. Try to copy that. No, can't do that. Oh, that's annoying. 105.718. And then if I like the way that that looks for some reason, I can save it. And then if I refresh my browser cache, takes a second, you can see that I've actually completely changed the I've actually completely changed all of the content on my site. Now, a lot of this theme is hard coding the background colors as well. So you would have to recreate this theme to make it truly customizable. And honestly, it is a bit of a limitation that it doesn't look like you can use the same CSS. Comments in more than one spot, but the theme customization tools are pretty powerful, and it's definitely something that you'd want to look into for solving a problem like this. And moreover, if you get stuck and you don't like it, I can't imagine why you wouldn't like this. You can also just reset the styles, and it will revert to using what you had in your theme. There we go. We cache the themes pretty aggressively, just so that we're not doing tons and tons of hits. So that is a completely different way of handling theme customizations. Matt brings up an excellent point that if you wanted to, this is certainly true if you've got a separate colors style sheet, which I do in my example. This is less applicable if we tried to add the comments to the existing style sheet, but you're totally right. He brings up the point that you can use the sort of inheriting power of CSS to actually handle this stuff. And if you wanted to make sure that something had the same color, you could just do this, which is obviously a problem that has already been solved. So that is a result of me just not thinking too clearly, but that would totally fix this problem. And you could copy, and it'd be relatively easy for you to look for all the different colors here that matched, and just build out a list of them in your colors document up here, and just continue on down and find all the instances of colors, and then for each one make sure they're used in the right spot, and you change half a dozen colors and you could completely remake your whole site. Excellent point. Oscar asks how we would approach different designs or CSS for mobile devices. That's an excellent question. The first thing I would do is I would download from the marketplace another free add-on. Whoops. This add-on's called the Mobile Theme Switcher. This is pretty simple stuff. What it does is it actually lets you specify different themes. It gives you a completely separate theme that you can use as a starting point, and you get an interface to specify that that's the theme you want to use for mobile devices. And we actually will typically recommend that sites use completely separate themes for mobile, and this thing takes care of figuring out if your current request is on a mobile device, and will serve up that theme for mobile devices transparently without you having to do any work. Faust says, are there certain modules, perhaps like designer content, that people should know about, or that you think most experienced users tend to add to their Concrete5 installs? Well, I don't know that they always add. I don't think anyone adds designer content to their installs by default, simply because it's it's like using Concrete5 as a tool to make stuff for Concrete5. And so definitely you might have one install that you use it for, or you might download it for a client site to build stuff for that site and then remove it, certainly. Designer content is a good one. Mobile theme switcher, definitely. The document library is pretty handy. What are some other ones? If you need to add a login, if a lot of people want to add login to parts of their site that aren't they want to add the form to a sidebar or something like that, the login block is nice for that. Um, a lot of people like the spacer block, because it just adds it just adds space based on height, and that can be handy. Um, what else? I find some social icons are always well in demand, but there's a ton of those on our site in different ways. Um, yeah, there's expand collapse as well. Um, what are some ones that I find myself using? Those are the big ones. Definitely for developers, designer content is a huge one. It's a really nice add-on. David says, you mentioned cleaning up the database when there are lots of revisions. Where are the docs on that? Fortunately, you don't have to do too much to do that. I believe, whoops, in the current version of Concrete 5, if you come into System and Settings and you look up Automated Jobs under the Optimization section, there is a job called Remove Old Page Versions, and it removes all except the 10 most recent page versions for each page. And if you open up that job, which is found within the concrete/jobs folder, remove old page versions, it's just a pretty simple PHP class, and you can if you for some reason wanted to add to it, like you had a pretty highly trafficked site that had thousands, you might even change 10 to 50. And that's just simple to just make sure that you go through and change search and replace. But if you run this, it will go through and it will remove it. And it says 17 versions deleted from page 1. So that's pretty big. It's a pretty big deal. And you can see when I come to page 1, it still completely looks the same because versions, we keep the content around, definitely. Um, One reason why it's good to remove move page versions is because when you add blocks to pages and then you delete them and you're creating new versions without those blocks, all that data stays around in your database until you remove the old version, because until you remove it, we don't know, you might want to jump back to it. And so we keep all the data around. And moreover, since we do joins to the versions table and certain things like the sitemap or the page list, it can slow sites down when you've got, our own site. I hesitate to even guess how many versions there are, but it could be north of 1 million. So definitely running this periodically is nice maintenance practice, and probably would keep your site um, pretty speedy. It can take a while. I remember running some maintenance on a site, and it took probably 3 to 4 minutes, and it hadn't gotten past the home page because it had to remove several thousand versions. And when it's removing versions, it's deleting blocks and clearing cache entries, and it can take a while. But it's meant to be run, and it will just run progressively, and so you can run it, basically you run it until you don't have to run it anymore. Yeah, we haven't really thought about making custom templates a part of the adding process. It's definitely, um, I could see it being useful, certainly, but there's a lot of blocks. If you add, it's not trivial to add a tab to a block window because you already have tabs in many block windows. So it's certainly not something we can do trivially. His question was about whether we could add custom templates into the flow of adding a block. Definitely something that's possible in theory, but we might want to think about how best to do it without confusing a bunch of people. But again, these are all these are blocks that, you know, this all just scripting through PHP. So you could even make it so that the edit view of your block set the custom template on the block if you wanted to. Um, yeah, so I think that about wraps up the class. Hope you guys, hope this has given you some new ways to think about theming your site and you know, solving problems with concrete5. I feel like it's actually been a pretty good one in terms of figuring out how to approach these problems. I mean, when we build these sites, these are problems we find ourselves sort of working with just very, very frequently. Just the decisions about whether something should be a block or a custom template for a block or a page, or should that be an attribute, all this kind of stuff. And hope there's no real right answer for any of this stuff. Hopefully we've given you some ways to think about the problems. And yeah, Matt should be posting this fairly soon. And thanks again for taking the class.